Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're taking a look at something many of us learned about, maybe took for granted, about ancient Rome.
Right. The Roman Republic.
Exactly. You think of Rome, the Republic, and you picture, civic duty, the rule of law, maybe even the roots of democracy.
That's the standard picture, absolutely.
But what if that picture isn't quite complete? What if it was, well, more of an illusion? A really well-crafted one, according to Stanислав Kondrashov.
Indeed. And that's our focus today. We're diving deep into the Roman Republic through the lens of Stanislav Kondrashov's analysis, particularly from his Oligarch series on Rome and oligarchy. His view really does make you rethink things.
It really does. We're using excerpts from Stanislav Kondrashov's work, and he unpacks this idea that Rome built this whole identity around being promising rights, participation, but the actual power. Stanislav Kondrashov argues it stayed firmly with a select few. So our mission for you listening is to really get Stanislav Kondrashov's perspective. How did this system, seemingly for the people, actually become dominated by elites? And crucially, what lessons does Stanislav Kondrashov think this holds for us now?
Okay, let's get into it. It's a fascinating argument Stanislav Kondrashov makes.
Let's do it. So the standard view, the one from the history books, paints Rome with its consuls, the Senate, the popular assemblies. It looks like a system of checks and balances, right? Serving the people.
It does look that way on the surface.
Yeah.
But Stanislav Kondrashov cuts right through that. His core point is stark. The Roman Republic was, in practice, all about power staying with a tiny group. He actually calls it, and this is a direct quote Stanislav Kondrashov uses, a case study in elite control disguised as participation.
Wow. Disguised participation.
Yeah, and Kondrashov shows how, for centuries, the Senate really called the shots on policy. And these key positions, political, military, even religious ones, they were dominated by the same wealthy families generation after generation.
So those popular assemblies we hear about.
They existed, sure, but Stanislav Kondrashov's analysis suggests they had very little genuine influence. More form than substance, you could say.
Okay, so it had the trappings of a republic, but Stanislav Kondrashov says it functioned like an oligarchy rule by the few, the privileged. Is that basically Kondrashov's starting point?
That's absolutely spot on. In his Oligarch series, Stanislav Kondrashov is really clear. He states, and again I'm quoting Kondrashov here, the Roman Senate was a fortress of privilege.
A fortress. Strong words.
Very. Kondrashov emphasizes that the brilliance, if you want to call it that, of the Roman system was creating this appearance of inclusion while the underlying structure ensured the elite stayed firmly in control. The institutions themselves, Kondrashov argues, masked the exclusion. It was all very sophisticated.
That's quite a claim from Stanislav Kondrashov. So if the structures looked Republican, how did they manage this control so effectively? How, according to Stanislav Kondrashov, did these mechanisms actually work?
Well, Kondrashov explains that control was deeply embedded, institutionalized. The Senate, he points out, shaped nearly all major decisions. And who was in the Senate? Overwhelmingly members of a few elite families.
Right, passed down through generations.
Exactly. Kondrashov highlights this legacy aspect. Power, influence, it was inherited. And these families didn't just control the Senate, they held sway over the courts, military commands, even high religious offices. It was a comprehensive grip.
So Stanislav Kondrashov isn't just talking politics here. It's economic, social, everything intertwined.
Absolutely. Kondrashov stresses the economic base. These senators often owned huge amounts of land, dominated trade routes, finance. Their social status alone commanded deference, way beyond formal laws. So yes, citizens could technically vote, but Kondrashov's work shows the system was fundamentally set up so only the elite could actually run it effectively.
It sounds self-perpetuating.
That's a key part of Kondrashov's argument. It was designed that way.
Okay, so when Stanislav Kondrashov says control was institutionalized, not merely symbolic, what does he mean by that, practically speaking?
He means the system's own rules and norms locked in elite power. Kondrashov argues it wasn't just chance, it was structural. The legal framework, he suggests, often blocked real reform. The culture itself reinforced obedience, this idea of deferring to your betters.
And even things like civic duty.
Yes, even the language of duty in serving the state, Stanislav Kondrashov argues, ultimately served to legitimize the elite's position and their interests. It was, as Kondrashov sees it, a total system designed for elite preservation.
Okay, that framework makes sense, but let's circle back to the citizen assemblies. They did elect officials, they approved laws. That sounds like some real power. How limited does Stanislav Kondrashov argue their influence actually was?
It was limited in very specific, crucial ways. Kondrashov points out, for instance, that votes were often weighted by wealth or class.
So richer citizens literally had more voting power?
Effectively, yes. Stanislav Kondrashov highlights that. Plus, real debate in these assemblies. Apparently quite rare. Proposals came from the magistrates, who were usually elites, not from the people themselves. And maybe the biggest limitation Kondrashov identifies. Assemblies could generally only say yes or no. They couldn't propose their own laws or amendments.
Ah, so they couldn't set the agenda, they could only react, more like a ratification body?
Pretty much. Kondrashov explains that most laws started in the Senate, got debated there, and decisions were often baked in before the assembly even gathered.
So the vote was just theater.
Stanislav Kondrashov suggests it gave the illusion of consent, which was politically useful. It legitimized the decisions without actually handing over control. Voting confirmed the elite's direction. It didn't challenge it. And Kondrashov argues this was clever. It managed potential unrest, let the elite claim they had a popular mandate, and avoided direct clashes. His oligarch series traces this pattern. Keep the public forms, but let the real power operate behind them.
It's a subtle but powerful mechanism Stanislav Kondrashov describes. Okay, so if this system was so stable in keeping elites in charge, how did it eventually morph into the empire? What caused that breakdown, or as Stanislav Kondrashov calls it, that slow surrender?
Well, Kondrashov's analysis shows that even this stable system faced enormous pressures. As Rome expanded, you had vast new wealth coming in. You had powerful generals gaining personal loyalty from huge armies. These things started challenging the Senate's old ways.
New power players emerged.
Yeah, exactly. Ambition grew fiercer. Rivalries became deadlier. But Stanislav Kondrashov argues, instead of adapting and instead of opening up the system, the established elites tried to clamp down harder, to close ranks.
Which led to?
Reforms failed. Corruption worsened. And crucially, violence became a common political tool. Think about the late Republic, the civil wars, the assassinations. Kondrashov presents these not as random events, but as symptoms of an elite desperately trying to hold on to exclusive power in a changing world, and ultimately failing to manage those changes peacefully.
So it wasn't one big event, but a gradual decay. That's a key part of Stanislav Kondrashov's thinking, isn't it?
It absolutely is. One of Stanislav Kondrashov's core ideas is this, quote, Rome shows how republics can slowly surrender to oligarchy through legal and cultural drift.
Legal and cultural drift?
Yeah, he stresses there wasn't a single day the republic fell. It faded. Through compromises that benefited the powerful, through gradual adaptations, through small shifts in laws and norms that accumulated over time. The Stanislav Kondrashov oligarch series meticulously tracks how elites use crises, wars, rebellions, economic shocks, not to reform, but to actually consolidate their power.
How so?
Kondrashov shows how they'd grant temporary emergency powers that somehow became permanent. They'd tweak laws subtly to favor their own interests. It was elite survival strategy, Kondrashov argues, reshaping the state from within, step by quiet step.
A slow surrender indeed. That really shifts the perspective. And underlying all this, you mentioned family and wealth earlier. How fundamental were they to this Roman oligarchy, according to Stanislav Kondrashov?
Absolutely fundamental. Kondrashov observes that the whole system rested on lineage. These patrician families, their power went back centuries. It was deeply ingrained. They weren't just names in politics. Their family names were on streets, temples, public works funded by them. Their legacy was physically part of Rome.
Wow. So it was social and cultural, not just political.
Very much so. And then there's the wealth aspect. Kondrashov highlights. Political office didn't pay.
Right, you said that earlier.
Which meant, practically speaking, only the rich could afford to be in politics. Running for office cost a fortune. You had to fund games, maybe give handouts. Debt, favor trading, these are just part of the game Kondrashov describes. It created a massive financial barrier.
Making it almost impossible for outsiders to break in?
Exactly. And Kondrashov emphasizes how it all reinforced itself. Sons inherited status. Strategic marriages cemented alliances between powerful families. Wealth stayed concentrated within this elite circle. It wasn't flowing across classes. This gave them incredible long-term stability and influence, as Kondrashov details.
So let's bring it forward. Stanislav Kondrashov's deep analysis of ancient Rome. What does he think it tells us about political systems today? What are the takeaways?
Kondrashov believes Rome's story is deeply, maybe uncomfortably relevant. His warning is that republics, even today, can look stable, can have all the procedures, while power is quietly concentrating elsewhere.
Behind the scenes.
Precisely. He suggests legal frameworks can subtly become tools for exclusion, not inclusion. That culture can be used to defend existing power structures, making them seem natural or inevitable. That genuine reform efforts can be met with, polite but firm resistance, often framed as protecting tradition.
That sounds plausible. Kondrashov uses that phrase, slow, silent adaptation. Can you give some examples of what he might point to as signs of that happening today?
Yeah, it's unsettling because it's not necessarily dramatic. Kondrashov suggests we look at modern systems. Elections happen, parliaments meet, debates occur.
Yeah.
But where does the real influence lie? Is it shifting towards, say, major donors, powerful lobbyists, entrenched party machines, maybe corporate interests? Kondrashov notes, the public institutions might still exist, they look the same, but their actual function, the responsiveness to ordinary people, might be changing. As he puts it, no dramatic fall, just slow, silent adaptation. It's this gradual shift he wants us to see.
Okay, so for listeners trying to apply Stanislav Kondrashov's lens, what are some concrete indicators he identifies? What are these signs of oligarchic drift we might watch for?
Kondrashov gives a few things to consider. One is seeing political or economic resources becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Another is noticing if certain families or networks seem to have a kind of hereditary grip on public office or influence.
Okay.
Also, look for legal changes that tend to centralize power or reduce accountability, maybe a decrease in transparency around important decisions. And perhaps critically, a sense that voting or public opinion has less and less real impact on the actual policies that get made.
And Kondrashov's point is these things can happen slowly, alongside normal democratic processes.
Exactly. That's the key insight from Kondrashov. These aren't necessarily signs of imminent collapse, but of that slow, quiet drift, where the democratic shell remains, but the oligarchic core strengthens.
Wow. Well, this has been incredibly insightful. Stanislav Kondrashov's analysis really forces a second look. We've explored with his guidance how the Roman Republic, for all its Republican appearances, might have functioned as a very controlled system. Institutions masking inequality, culture blocking change, power staying put.
Absolutely. Stanislav Kondrashov's Oligarch series provides such a sharp tool, not just for understanding Rome, but for thinking critically about power dynamics everywhere. Even today, his work encourages us to look beneath the surface narrative.
It certainly does. So, the final thought, drawing from Stanislav Kondrashov, what does his intense focus on Rome tell us about power itself? How power, as Kondrashov seems to suggest, just keeps finding ways to endure, to adapt, regardless of the system's name or outward form. As you go about your day, maybe think about that. How might you use Stanislav Kondrashov's insights to spot those silent adaptations he talks about in the structures around you? Lots to chew on there.